Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Adventures. And today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo Mod Spotlights. This will be part 192, so we're getting quite close to that big 200 milestone. So we're going to take a look at some of the wonderful mods people will be making and use them to talk some about the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got a few mammals, mostly mammals today. I think it is actually all mammals today, but a very interesting assortment. You know, got some ungulates, got some carnivores, and got some marsupials. So, really cool one. But we're going to be starting off with a really cool exhibit animal. This was done by Tosco DS. We have got the eastern moles. Let's have a look at these little guys in here. Exhibit camera. So you can see this guy hanging out. Let's have a look at him and see if you can spot him hanging out in the sun. Somewhat. Yeah, the little mole. And they're cool. Yeah, I don't think they want to hang out in the sun. This is the closest we'll get. We'll have a look at you in there because you're real cute. Anyway, so the eastern mole, or the Scalpus aquaticus, these guys are typically found throughout the central and eastern United States, with the western edge of their range including East Texas, northward to Nebraska, and their northern limits seeming to be Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Massachusetts. And they're common along the east coast and can be found as far north as Massachusetts and can be found even down in South Florida, but are absent in western Pennsylvania and western West Virginia. So in terms of their habitats, like other moles, they are fossorial, so they typically dig burrows, and they dig burrows in areas such as forests, lawns, pastures, and gardens. And they typically build branching tunnels which they travel through and forage, and they do occupy multiple habitat types provided they have loamy or slightly damp soil in which to burrow, and despite their name they do not like to burrow in saturated soil near water. Yeah, these guys are pretty generalist. They've got these very large hands that allow them to basically swim through soil, which is really cool. So eastern moles vary in body length between 144 to 187 millimeters and have hairless tails that are about 18 to 33 millimeters. Their hind feet are about 22 to 22 centimeters long, millimeters long, and adults typically weigh between 65 to 140 grams. You can see they have the glossy silver, brown, or black fur that occasionally has white patches. Their front paws, you can see, are quite large, and especially compared to their back paws, and that's what they use for digging. They are broad with large claws, webbed feet, and outward-facing palms. And eastern moles, you can see, also have a long nose, and they also have black external ears. They have weak eyesight as well, as their eyes are actually covered by a layer of skin. And even though their eyes actually do help, them detect light and dark. Males in general tend to be larger than females, but there's no really difference in colour. Juveniles will leave the nest at about 4 weeks of age, and at that point they're basically the same size as adults, so it doesn't take them very long to grow. So in terms of reproduction, they are sexually dimorphic, with males being larger on average than females, and females will often choose to mate with larger males, and male competition plays a role in mate selection. So other than the breeding season, they tend to interact very little with each other, and they often will emit chemicals from scent glands on their bellies to signal that they are reproductive, and males will mate with many females, which suggests they have a polygamous mating system. As I mentioned, the main solitary throughout the year, except for in the breeding season, which begins in late March to early April, and after gestation about 40 to 45 days, the young are born in May, and female eastern moles are viviparous, so they basically give birth to live young. 1 litter of 3 to 5 young are born annually and weigh about 5 grams each at birth. And young eastern moles develop rapidly and leave the nest about 4 weeks, and they reach sexual maturity at a year old, which is interesting. Female eastern moles actually do care for their young until they're about 4 weeks, and at that point they can forage. In some instances they have been known to cannibalize the young, but for this reason is unknown. And in terms of lifespan, female eastern moles tend to live longer than males. In South Carolina, the oldest males were found to be 5.2 years old, and the oldest female was 6 years old, and the longest lived captive was about 2 years old. Eastern moles have a 50% expected mortality rate within their first 6 months of life, and researchers think that's because they move with risks of going out into trying to establish new territories, and threat of predation as juveniles is higher in unfamiliar habitats. In terms of behavior, they seem to be active throughout the day, but are primarily diurnal and spend 21 to 23 hours foraging for food. They are burrowers, and they dig two main types of tunnels. They have shallow surface runs and deep runs. Shallow surface ones are temporary and usually 2 to 3 centimeters below the surface. The permanent runs or deep runs are permanent and about 10 to 40 centimeters. They typically use these shallow runs to look for food, and females will build their nests and care for their young in deep runs. When the ground is dry and hard during the summer or frozen during the winter, eastern moles dig fewer shallow runs and new tunnels and use more tunnels that already exist, which are primarily deep runs. So eastern moles, as I mentioned as well, are nearly blind and do not have external ears, and they do have excellent sense of touch and smell. That's what they use to kind of move their way through the world. And the nostrils are adapted to discern the direction of odors, and they've actually been observed to obtain their food. They hit their prey against the wall, and sometimes will pile large amounts of dirt onto their prey. So in terms of home range, you typically have a home range that's typically males have about a hectare, females about 0.2 of a hectare as well. And they do, as I mentioned, they have reduced eyes, they're nearly blind, all that kind of stuff. They actually do make noises. They take high-pitched squeals when fighting and short snorts when they are sensing their surroundings, which is quite interesting. In terms of their diet, they feed primarily on ants, earthworms, centipedes, and beetle larvae, as well as other insects. And although they are mainly insectivorous, they have been known to eat potatoes, oats, corn, and tomatoes. And analysis actually looking into the stomach contents of eastern moles showed that about 70% of their stomach contents were beetle larvae, 63% was ants, 47% centipedes. And a similar study showed that these respective groups, they eat a lot of insects. And in terms of predation, they are fossorial and rarely come out of their burrows, which helps them avoid many predators. Most predators cannot fit into their burrows except for mustelids or snakes. Occasionally, they can be preyed upon by all sorts of different animals if they exit their burrow, so things like red foxes, grey foxes, coyotes, dogs, cats, all of those kind of animals, red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, owls, barred owls, and barn owls. And when threatened by predators, they actually do release a chemical that's like a stinky odor. And humans also threaten the moles by making lethal traps, because moles in agricultural and suburban areas create molehills that can damage crops or disturb lawns. But in terms of the ecological role, they are very important in aerating the soil. So by burrowing tunnels, they actually expose the soil to more oxygen and allow water to better percolate in the soil. And they also likely play a role in controlling invertebrate populations. And they do so for a host of many different species of parasites. In terms of their impact on humans, as I mentioned, they do aerate the soil, which is really good, and they do eat pets. But I mentioned they do make molehills and things like that can damage lawns and gardens. But they are considered a species of least concern. They're doing quite well. However, they are listed as a species of concern in Canada. They're not listed on any international conservation lists, and they seem to be declining in southern Texas and Mexico, and are considered extremely rare and perhaps even extirpated from some areas. Eastern mole populations are threatened by agricultural and residential developments, which decrease their habitat, but in some cases humans actually use lethal traps to control their population. But there's not really, sadly, any conservation efforts to help protect these moles, but that means they're kind of still common. They are declining in some areas. You know, the really cool species, definitely like this guy, the awesome one. So Toscodius, winner. Let's see what else we can find in here, in the information. The name refers to early descriptions because they used to swimming. We mentioned that. The density of the fur allows them to move smoothly through tunnels. It does not show resistance when moved. They can develop 18 feet per hour in their tunnels, which is cool. And they do not hibernate, since the burrows reach too far deep below the forest. And they remain active year-round. So that's another really cool one. Yeah, really, really cool little guys. So that's by Toscodius, everyone's favourite little mole. They're very, very cute. But next up, we're going to have a look at an animal from prehistory. We have got Xenurix amygdalae. So let's have a look at these guys. So Xenurix, which means strange horn in Greek. These guys are an extinct ruminant species known from the Miocene of Europe. The species itself was found in Spain, and it's part of the group Paleomyricidae, which is a very interesting group. They are a group of neo-gene ruminants that are actually kind of co-evolved with lots of things with that, but they're actually more closely related to things like giraffes, and you can see these kind of and pronghorns. So they have ossicones like giraffes do today, and there's other groups that kind of consider convergent evolution, things like that. Yeah, it's a really cool species. So the species is, as I mentioned, Xenurix amygdalae, which was found in central Spain, and it bears this unique, it's like T-shaped protrusion out here, out of its head, and that's where it's got a specific name, amygdalae, because it actually refers to, if you love Star Wars, you like this one, it refers to the character, Senator Padme Amidala, Senator Padme Amidala, who in Star Wars, due to the striking resemblance of the kind of ossicone there, the optical appendage, you could say, it does look like one of her hairstyles. And when Padme had it, and in the Phantom Menace, I haven't actually seen those. I've seen the original Star Wars. I haven't seen much of the prequels, but I've seen like clips of them. It's pop culture. You can't you not. But she does kind of have that look to her, and I know Star Wars fans quite like that. Yeah, we got Senator Amygdalae's kind of species here, so another one. And one of my favourite ones is this cheeky one. There's this trilobite that's genus and species name is Han Solo. So if you like Star Wars, there's a lot of Star Wars nerds in the paleontology community as well. Let's have a look. Yeah, pretty much covers that. You can see it's found in Spain. The specific epithet Amygdala is referred to the camera Padme Amidala from the Star Wars due to structural resemblance. I'm going to mention that. Giraffe and okapi of the Jurabajae are the only one living members of this clade, and with decline. Ossicones are only found in some members of the superfamily Giraffidae, which includes giraffes, okapi, and extinct relatives like these guys. They're roughly the same size as a living okapi, and the global climate cooled considerably during the Neogene, culminating in a series of continental glaciations from the Quaternary period that followed. That's quite cool. The really cool species. This one was done by Great Cakes Mod. Always a winner with a Great Cakes Mod. We'll have a look at the cute little baby before we get a chance to head off. But yeah, definitely a big fan. Love to see some extinct animals getting some love, of course. Especially Great Cakes. She makes them look really awesome. She does really good reconstructions. Anyway, we're going to be carrying on to the next one. We've got Monsoon, who has given us the Topi. So here is the Topi. So this is Dermalectus lunturus gemala, which is a subspecies of the Topi, and is usually just called the Topi. These guys are highly sociable and fast species of antelope that found in sub-Saharan Africa. So the word taupe or Topi comes from Swahili, which is kind of referred to the local populations in Kenya, and now they kind of refer to it as Dermalectus Topi. And in English, sportsmen often refer to it as the Senegal hartebeest. The same species now recognised as the Lutus carnelium. So this is an animal with lots of different subspecies. It should probably be split into different species, to be completely honest. So this species was subspecies originally described in 1892 by German zoologist Paul Maschert, based on the skull, shot by a famous German hunter Richard Boehm in what is now Tanzania. And at the turn of the century, the accepted name for Topi in East Africa, but then there was a new subspecies described, and there's kind of been some controversy whether they've been split into different species, and because there's potentially, I think, like 8 different subspecies that all potentially could be. Some try to split in 3 species. Some have made each subspecies their own species. Whether you kind of agree with that or not is kind of up to you. But they're trying to. It's a bit of a taxonomic mess, the species is. In terms of its description, you can see they've got a very interesting pelt that varies a lot depending on the region, and it becomes being darker and lighter. So this subspecies has horns with a shape that gives it the effect of its being them having a lyrate profile, which can be seen from a certain angle, as opposed to lunate, which is seen as also like subspecies. And the primary, they are principally indistinguishable from the Topi ones that can be found east along the coast, and can be also kind of similar to hartebeest as well. In terms of its ecology, these guys tend to prefer pastures with green grass that are medium in height and leaf-like swards. They are more densely populated in areas with green plants that last through the dry season, so areas particularly near water. When foraging for food, they tend to take small bites at a fast rate. In terms of the Topi, they have probably what's considered the most diverse social organization in all of antelopes. Their reproductive organization ranges from the traditional territory system to resource defense polygamy, herds that gather for short times and that contain short-lasting territories to lake systems. So pretty much just the run of the gambit, so a little bit of everything they like to do. So we'll have a look at the baby while we talk about their births and everything. So in terms of the vast majority of births will typically occur for October to December, with half of them being typically in October. The fidelity of a female to a territory can last 3 years in this Serengeti, and the females have these territories that function as part of a male's harem. And the herds tend to be closed, except when new females are accepted, and both males and females defend the territory. So in terms of their conservation, they are considered vulnerable. So the global population was estimated in 1998 to be 71,000 Topi. That was considered least concern, but there has been evidence of a decline. Though they mostly live in protected areas, so that decline means they are going down, so they are deemed as vulnerable. But because they are living in a lot of protected areas, things like that, they're just kind of considered vulnerable. In Tanzania, there's estimated to be 58,000 individuals. It can be found across the Serengeti and things like that. In Kenya, there's about 126,000 in the period of 1977-1980, and the most recent estimates suggest that there's only about 20,000 at the moment. But they are found kind of all over the place in those areas and are doing generally okay. So that's another really cool species that we get to talk about. And yeah, it's a taxonomic mess, this one is, but I do like having a look at the Topi. We'll have a look at the female because we didn't get a chance to really look at her. But yeah, the males and females, there's not a lot of striking sexual dimorphism. And just another great mod from, Monsoon. I really like that they managed to get the fur look real shiny and get that texture look that's pretty spot on. A really awesome mod. Definitely frontier quality. But yeah, that is the Topi. Done by Monsoon. Next up, we got one mod done by Leaf and Nicholas Linerider. Of course, the dream team. We've got the giant forest hog. So we've got this guy here. So the giant forest hog, or Hydrochlorus xenurix, if you say that, are the only member of its genus. And is native to wooded habitats of Africa and is actually one of the largest members of the pig family. It was first described in 1904 with a specific name honouring the Richard Merringutson who shot the type specimen in Kenya and shipped it to England. So that's why he's got that name. On average, they are considered the largest living species of suid, or the largest living species of pig in the world. So adults can measure between 1.3 to 2.1 meters, or about 4'3" to 6'11" in head to body length, with the additional length of about 25 to 45 centimeters or 9 to 17 inches on the tail. Adults stand between 0.75 and 1.1 meters, or 2'6" to 3'7" at the height at the shoulder, and can weigh between 100 and 275 kilograms, or 220 to 606 pounds. Females are on average smaller than the males, with females weighing a median about 167 kilograms, about 368 pounds, while males on average weigh about 210 kilograms or 460 pounds. The eastern dominant subspecies seems to be slightly larger than the one West Africa, but is largely that's considered larger than related species of bush pigs, which have like a top weight of about 150 kilograms. The giant forest hog is quite extensively hairy. You can see lots of hairs across its body. And though they tend to be less pronounced as the animal ages. They are mostly black in colour, though the hairs nearest the skin are a deep orange colour. Their ears are large and pointy, and their tusks are proportionally smaller than those of warthog, but bigger of those of bush pigs. So they're kind of like an in-between there. But nevertheless, the tusks of males can reach about 35 centimeters or about 14 inches long. And you can see, like Red River hogs and bush pigs, they got a little fur coming out there, up this side there. So in terms of their habitats, they occur in West and Central Africa, where they are typically restricted to the Guinean and Congolese forests. They also occur in more locally in the humid highlands of the Rwenzori Mountains, which is the border between Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and can be found as far east as Mount Kenya in the Ethiopian highlands. They are mostly found in more forest grassland kind of mosaic kind of places, but have been seen in wooded savanna and subalpine habitat up to about 3,800 meters or 12,000 feet above sea level. They are unable to cope with low humidity or prolonged exposure to the sun, and since resulting in them being absent from arid regions or areas without a lot of dense cover. So they tend to prefer areas with a lot of good cover. I'll have a look at the female pig over here. And she cutie. In terms of their habits, these guys are mostly herbivores, but they do also scavenge. They usually are considered nocturnal, but in cold periods they can more commonly be seen in daylight hours. It's also interesting. But they may be diurnal in regions when protected from humans. In terms of, they live in herds or sonders of up to about 20 animals, consisting of females and offspring, but usually also including an old single male. Females leave the sonder before giving birth and return with the piglets about a week after pediatrician, or pretty much after they kind of give birth and things like that. Did they end up having babies? I don't think they did end up having babies. Well, that's fine. I think the babies were probably too big anyway, but yeah, they have little piglets, not totally different from other piglets. All members of the sonder protect the piglets, and the piglet can nurse from all females. The boars typically will fight as well. They'll run head-on into each other, focusing on head pushing to try and, gore and slash the opponent with their lower tusks. As with all suids found in sub-Saharan Africa, they were not domesticated, but can easily be tamed and considered to have potential for domestication. Though in the wild, they tend to be more feared than red river hogs and bush pigs, and males will actually sometimes attack without warning, possibly to protect their group. They've also been known to drive spotted hyenas away from carcasses and fight among males, resulting in the death of one of the participants is not uncommon. Despite their size and potential aggressive behavior, they have been known to fall prey to leopards, especially probably almost exclusively large male forest leopards, which are larger than savanna leopards, and clans of spotted hyena. Although some localities, the lion may be a predator for giant forest hogs, they typically don't interact because they prefer different habitats, as African lions do not typically like dense forests, and giant forest hogs typically don't like open plains. So they don't really meet very often, but they still prey to leopards and spotted hyenas. But that's a really, really cool animal. Definitely do love a giant forest hog. Really, really cool. Another great mod, by Leaf and Nick. That's definitely a winner. So next up we have got we've got another one that's just by Leaf this time. We have got the companion to the South American Kawati. We've got here the Whitenosed Kawati. So the Whitenosed Kawati is also known as the Kawati mundi. These guys are a species of Kawati in the raccoon family, so they are related to raccoons and South American Kawatis. And local Spanish names give them the name the Aton, Gatosolo, Tejon, and Bizote, depending on the region. So they typically weigh between 4 to 6 kilograms or 8 to 13 pounds and have a nose to tail length of about 110 centimeters or 3.6 feet, with about half that length being tail length. However, small females typically weigh as little as 3 kilograms or 6 pounds, but large males can weigh as much as 9 kilograms or 20 pounds. So the Whitenosed Kawati is distributed as far north as Flagstaff, Arizona, New Mexico, and through into Mexico and down into the border with Panama. They typically live in wooded areas in tropical and subtropical dry forests, and at elevations up to about 3,000 meters or about 9,000 feet. So the way to try to tell them apart is, or to know the difference between a white-faced and a South American Kawati is basically, if you're in America or Central America, it's the white-faced Kawati. If it's in South America, it's the normal species of Kawati, or the South American Kawati. The species or the population that was typically found on Cozumel Island has been treated as a different species, as the Cozumel Island Kawati, but the vast majority of authorities have actually treating it as a subspecies of the population, as they are smaller than the mainland population due to insular dwarfism. But when compared to more widely to white-nosed Kawatis, they seem to be differences size is not clear, and the level of other differences also support a classic of a subspecies rather than different species. So they probably haven't been there long enough to really delineate into different species, but there's definitely differences in the population to help them adapt to living on island, insular dwarfism, things like that. They have been found also in Florida, where they're believed to be introduced, though it's unknown precisely where they were introduced. An early specimen was actually found in 1928 that was considered escaped captive in 1928. And there have been a number of sightings of coatis found across southern Florida, and there's potentially a population breeding there, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised, like maybe during an interglacier they may have got up to Florida sometime. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were historically populations of coatis in Florida. So unlike many of their relatives, like raccoons and kinkajous, these guys are actually considered diurnal, and they do much of their foraging during the day, so very similar to the South American coati. So white-nosed Kawatis are known as pollinators of the basala tree, which actually observed in a study in Costa Rica. So they've been observed inserting their noses into the flowers and ingesting the nectar, while the flower showed no damage. Pollen from the flower covers the face of the Kawati, following feed and disseminates through the surrounding forest, following detachment. And they've also observed this dependent relationship between the balsa tree, which provides a critical role in hydration and nutrition for the Kawati. So it's a mutualistic relationship. So the benefit of the tree is that means it gets pollinated and increases, its proliferation. But the benefit of the Kawati is that they can come and drink the nectar, which is important for both the hydration and the nutrition. So they drink it and, get a good meal out of it. So it is a beneficial, symbiotic relationship, which is quite cool. And very similar to, southern Kawatis, South American Kawatis, they are omnivores, so they feed mostly on the ground, and they'll look for small vertebrates, fruits, carrion, insects, snakes, and eggs, and they can climb their trees, and they use their long tail for balancing. On that long tail, they typically stick up, but that would require a bit of rig editing that isn't not really working too well. I know Leaf has kind of been struggling with that a bit, but typically the Kawatis, if sometimes they look like little brontosauruses running around, they typically tend to hold their tail up, and that's why it's kind of going into the ground. But it's still really cool. It's a really awesome mod regardless. It does really look good. I'm definitely a big fan. It's nice that we've got the raccoon as well. So that's their feeding habits. Let's have a look at the cute little babies as we talk about their reproduction. So adult male Kawatis typically live solitary lives, except during the mating season, while females live in groups called bands. That includes their offspring and males less than 2 years old. Gestation lasts about 10 to 11 weeks for the species, and litters typically consist of 2 to 7 young, and the young are weaned at 4 months of age, and then they reach adult size at about 15 months. So Kawatis can live as long as 7 years in the wild, and in captivity the average lifespan is about 14 years, but some people have claimed to have captive ones that lived into the late teens. And both the South American and white-nosed Kawati are both considered least concern. However, the Kawati is actually considered endangered in Mexico. So that's another interesting thing as well. Yeah, they do have, as I mentioned, very similar behavior. And yeah, they live in bands. I already kind of mentioned that. But yeah, the main difference is they believe to have split. They're both in South American, and the white-nosed Kawati split about 5 million years ago. So they're definitely a different population. Yeah, it's quite cool. Really cool little species. Nice to see them in the game. And I think they would have been a good addition to the Americas Pact, personally. Either the white-nosed or the South American. But anyway, still nice to have them as a good mod. Leaf makes Frontier quality mods anyway. Yeah, really, really cool. So that was done by Leaf. Next up, we've got a mod done by Great Cakes. She's got a feature in there at least once or twice in every mod showcase at the moment. So we've got here an animal that I'm quite familiar with, being a New Zealander. We've got the common bushtail possum. So another really cool one here. Very, very funky guy. So the common bushtail possum, which means is Trillosaurus volcipella, which is Greek for fairy-tailed little fox, which is quite funny. These guys are a nocturnal, semi-arboreal marsupial found in the family Phacastidae, and is native to Australia and has been introduced and is considered invasive in New Zealand. And they are the second largest of all the possums. So in terms of their description, the common bushtail possum has large and pointy ears. Its bushy tail is actually adapted for grabbing branches, and it's prehensile at the end with a hairless ventral patch, so a patch on the bottom that allows them to grab things. The forefeet have sharp claws, and the first toe of each hind limb is clawless, but they still have a strong grasp. The possum grooms itself with its third and fourth toe, which have been fused together. They have a thick and woolly pelt, which varies in colour a lot in this species. Colours then range, as you can see kind of here, we've got like a silvery brown to reddish to black or cream colour. And the ventral areas are typically lighter than darker brown or blay, and the muzzle tends to be dark as well. So the common bushtail possum has a head to body length of about 32 to 58 centimetres, or about 13 to 23 inches, and a tail length of about 24 to 40 centimetres. And they typically weigh between 1.2 to 4.5 kilograms, or 2.6 to 9 pounds. And males are generally larger than females, and the males tend to be more reddish around the shoulders. And as most marsupials, they do have a forward-facing pouch. And the chest of both sexes have a scent gland that secretes a reddish secretion that stains the fur around it, and that uses it to mark their territory. So look at this one here, because it's eating and, being funny. In terms of its range and habitat, they are actually considered one of the most widespread marsupials in Australia, and they're found throughout the eastern and northern parts of the continent, as well as some western regions in Tasmania, and a number of offshore islands, such as Kangaroo Island and Barrow Island. Western Australia alone has several populations that have all been given different names, which is quite interesting as well, by different Aboriginal groups. They are also widespread in New Zealand, as they were introduced in 1850, and they can be found in lots of areas such as forests, semi-arid forests, and even urban areas, and found a lot on farms. They are mostly a forest-inhabiting species, however they can be found in treeless areas, and in New Zealand they do prefer broadleaf protocarp forests near pastures. In southern beech forests they are less common. However, they're more densely populated in New Zealand in their native country, because they do have predators over there. In New Zealand they don't. In Australia, they maybe have more fragmented eucalyptus forests and more predators. In Australia, they are threatened to be killed by humans, tiger quolls, dholes, foxes, cats, goannas, carpet snakes, and powerful owls. Though in New Zealand, they're only really hunted by humans and cats. And the population in Australia, they're considered endangered. In New Zealand, they're considered invasive. So it's quite a comparison, especially culturally, because in New Zealand, we kind of have especially farmers, a lot of people, they're part of the predator-free 2050, get rid of them because they are quite invasive and destroy forests and eat bird eggs that are endangered. So a lot of the times when a New Zealander comes to, Australia comes to New Zealand, they tend to be like, oh, why are you running over these possums? They're endangered back there. But, here they're invasive, which is quite funny. The northern subspecies of the common bushtail possum has declined substantially, with finding about 50% reduction. And a lot of this seems to be suggests the species concentrating toward areas with higher rainfall, lower fire frequency, and higher vegetation cover. So in terms of foods and foraging, they are quite adaptable and feed on a variety of vegetation, but they are largely omnivorous. They do prefer eucalyptus leaves, but they will also eat the flowers, shoots, buds, and seeds. They'll also consume animal matter such as insects, bird eggs, and chicks, and other small vertebrates. They may eat about 3 to 4 different plant species during a foraging trip, unlike some individual and arboreal marsupials such as koalas and greater gliders. They tend to focus on a single species. Their round molars cannot cut eucalyptus leaves as finely as more specialized diets, so they're more adapted to crushing them, allows them to chew fruit and herbs more effectively. And their caecum, or their kind of large intestine, actually lacks internal ridges and cannot separate coarse and fine materials as efficiently as some other arboreal marsupials. And they cannot rely on eucalyptus alone to get its protein, so they're more generalist with a mixed diet. However, it does provide adequate nitrogen. So in terms of their behaviour, the common bushtail possum is typically nocturnal and arboreal, and they are mostly solitary, with individuals keeping their distance by scent marks. They usually make their dens in natural places such as tree hollows and caves. Let's have a look at another colour one, which is quite cool. There's another one that's a little bit more of like an orangish colour. And also in the spaces of roos, I've had a few possums hang out in the garage. Individuals from New Zealand use many more den sites than Australian ones, and they compete with each other and other animals for den space, and that contributes to their mortality. And this is likely another reason why the population densities in Australia are lower than those in New Zealand. And the bushtail possum are usually not aggressive towards each other and usually just stare with erect ears, but they vocalize using clicks, grunts, hisses, alarms, guttural coughs, and screeching. We'll have a look at the cute little babies now, because I do love a cute little baby possum. Little Joey. We love a little Joey. So this little Joey is quite cute. So the common bushtail possum can breed at any time of the year, but breeding tends to peak in the spring from September to November, and in autumn from March to May in some areas. Mating is promiscuous and random, with some males siring several young in a season, while over half sire none. In one Queensland population, males apparently need a month of consorting with females before they can mate with them. And the gestation for these guys, being a marsupial, doesn't take very long. It's about 16 to 18 days, and after which they give birth to a single young. A newborn bushtail possum is only about 1.5 centimeters or 0.6 inches long and weighs about 2 grams. But as usual, they climb unaided to the female's fur to get to the pouch, and then they climb in the pouch and attach to a teat. The young develop and remain in their mother's pouch for another 4 to 5 months. And a preliminary study actually inducing ovulation through exposure to hormones actually changed the appearance of the mammary glands in females, suggesting they provide immunizational protection to neonates through milk secretion. Though when older, the young is left in the den or rides on the mother's back until they're about 7 to 9 months old. And females reach sexual maturity when about their year old, but males do not reach until their second year. And they can live up to about 13 years in the wild in the right conditions, which is an interesting one as well. Female young tend to have a higher survival rate than their male counterparts due to them establishing home ranges close to their mothers, while males have to travel further in search of new nesting sites, encouraging established territories where they may be forcibly rejected. In the New Zealand Okorongo population, female young have been found to continue to associate with their mothers after weaning, and some even inherit their prime dead sides. A possible competition exists between mothers and daughters of dens, and daughters may be excluded from a den occupied by the mother. In forests with a shortage of den sites, females are bred to produce more sons, which do not compete directly for den sites. And with forests of plenty den sites, the females will typically have young. So in terms of relationship with humans, they are considered a pest in some areas and are known to cause damage to pine plantations, regenerative forests, flowers, fruit trees, and buildings. Like other possums, they are rather tolerant of humans and can sometimes be hand-fed, although this is not encouraged, as the claws can be quite sharp and can cause infections. And they are considered a traditional food source for First Nations people, or Aborigines. In Australia, although they were once extensively hunted for their fur, they are now largely protected in Australia. Tasmania does give crop protection permits to landowners to control their populations, if their crops are being damaged. While its population is declining in some regions due to habitat loss, urban populations indicate adaptation to the presence of humans. In some mainland states, possum trapping is permitted where attempting to evict possums from human residence, i.e. or like roos. But the possum must be released within 24 hours of capture, no more than 50 metres from the trapping site. In some states, though, like Victoria, trapping possums may be taken to registered veterinarians to be euthanized. In South Australia, they are fully protected and permits are required to trapping possums in human residence or keeping or rescued sick or injured possums and other native wildlife. In Queensland, though, they can only be trapped by licensed commercial relocators who must release possums within 25 metres at the point of capture to ensure the animal is not released into another possum's home range. And possums are less likely to survive if they're released into a new area and they do not have a den, must compete with neighbouring possums for den sites. So they've got to be released a certain distance away just to make sure they have a fighting chance. But New Zealand, they were introduced by European settlers in the 1850s as part of the fur trade. Oh, that's my phone. I was thinking, what the heck? Sorry about that. I don't know what the heck happened there. I think my phone was listening to me. That's kind of creepy. Anyway, the common bushtail possum is actually considered a major threat to New Zealand's native forests and birds. It is also a host for the bovine tuberculosis, which has not been an issue in Australia where it's been eradicated, but in New Zealand it can cause, issues for livestock. By the 1980s, the peak population has reached about 60 to 70 million possums, but it is now down to about 30 million due to control measures. And the New Zealand Department of Conservation typically controls their numbers with 1080 baits. So hunting is not restricted, and the population seems to be stable, even with killing thousands of animals. So they are doing good in New Zealand. They're not as common as they used to be, which is a good thing because they are invasive, but their populations are stable. So they're really trying to get them down to predator-free 2050. So possums are pests in New Zealand and Tasmania, where they are culled for their meat and fur. However, due to bovine tuberculosis being prevalent across New Zealand, they're only really generally eaten in Northland, where possums disease does not exist in possums. And in Northland, possum meat has even been used for meat pies, so that's quite interesting. Might have to try one when I go up to Northland. Though in Tasmania, they can be served in some restaurants. But yeah, they are kind of hunted somewhat, but not like extensively. And as I mentioned, they are invasive. And because they eat a lot of regrowing vegetation in New Zealand's forests, and also eat birds, they birds' eggs, so they're quite impactful on those species. And then one of the 8 species in the predator-free 2050 is trying to get rid of them. Even though they do have this little bit of industry going on here, probably don't make so much money out of it though. But yeah, another really cool species that we get to talk about. Yeah, that's the bushtail possum. So last but certainly not least, we have got the Argentine Puma, or the, Puma. So this is the cougar, we all love a cougar. So this is specifically the South American subspecies. So there's 2 different species of Puma, or subspecies of mountain lion or Puma, or whatever you want to use. This is basically Puma concala, which is from South America, and it's found through all of South America except maybe the Andes, and the Koguga, which isn't found in North and Central America, and probably northwest and South America. So this is the South American one, typically found in Argentina, things like that. What's really interesting as well, looking at the genetics of these guys, they seem to have evaded down into South America between 2 to 4 million years ago during the Great American Biotic Interchange. So a lot of animals swapped between the Americas, saber-toothed cats and direwolves, well, not direwolves, saber-toothed cats and things got to go down to South America, and mastodons, well, a lot of animals like ground sloths and direwolves got to go up to North America, so that's really cool. Looking at the genetic relationships of the cougars around both Americas, they're actually considered one of the most widespread mammals on the planet. They found a high level of genetic similarity amongst North American cougar populations. It actually suggests that they may have descended from, they were actually extirpated or considered extinct, made extinct in the area during the Ice Age, with the great extinction of, the mammoth and the mastodons and all that, and the quaternary extinction of it. So they went extinct in North America, but a small population in South America managed to then go back up to North America and replace those populations. So there are actually a lot more genetic diversity in the southern and northern. That's quite interesting as well. So in terms of the South American cougar, or the South Andean mountain lion is another cool name, they are considered the dominant subspecies. And they were considered a few different subspecies at the time. What was the one in Argentina, like Puma, concala, cabellidae was actually considered the Argentinian Puma, but they've all been lumped into this 2 different subspecies model at the moment. In terms of their behavior and ecology, the South American Puma is quite a solitary and secretive cat. A single puma's range may actually cover hundreds of square kilometers that the cat patrols and travels quite significant distances during the day. A large range particularly means more cached or hoarded kills for later consumption, as well as different nests, den and bedding sites, with vast territories enable cats to scent mark their territories and decipher pheromones from pumas and other animals that have passed through. So typically only the mother and with their young, or as it is adolescent siblings, near their own, and male-female encounters during the mating season. Though in South America, they are seldom seen in pairs and groups, and I believe there actually have been reports of them potentially pack hunting together. Mothers care for and wean their cubs for up to about a year before she abandons them or chases them off in time for the next reproductive cycle. With large dominant male pumas may actually threaten or kill young cubs if they determine potential competition for their resources or future bloodlines. That's an interesting one as well. So depending on the location, they do hunt a wide variety of species. There can be many different species of birds, primates, opossums, rodents, different types of deer, tapirs, sloths, snakes, lizards. Depending on where you are, further south, this is because this is Argentina Puma, so this typically can be found preying on guanaco, vicuña, pudu, South Andean deer, pampas deer, Patagonian mara, Gashara, rhea, Andean mountain cats, and South American foxes, as well as livestock, such as llamas and alpacas and cattle and poultry and sheep and goats and things like that. Certain populations have actually been known to hunt non-native introduced species, such as red deer in Argentina, black buck, or North American beavers. So that's quite interesting as well. And in the San Gabriel National Park, which I believe is in Argentina, the vicuña is actually quite a common prey item and actually consists of about 80% of the diet. However, they will abandon kills if not cached quickly, because they often would be harassed by birds such as Andean condors, and the presence of large raptors, things like that, causes South American cougars to kill and store 50% more prey than North American cougars. So they've got to compete, with Andean condors trying to steal them off their carcasses and things like that. But in terms of their cultural significance, like the jaguar, the cougar has historical cultural significance to many groups in South America. They regard them to be either a snatcher of souls or helpers of people. The cougar's name was used for the Indian regions and people, the Chanacas, who were enemies of the Incan and had cougars as kind of their deity or their god. And they are kind of considered to be near threatened because, they're large predators and there's declines in competition with livestock and things like that. It's a big thing because, their prey competes with livestock and things like that in hunting, and that's kind of their main threats, but they're overall doing not too bad. But we've got to have a look at these cute little cubs before we go. Look at these cute little guys. Yeah, not too different. There are subspecies of cougars. So now we got the Florida panther, which is just a population of North American cougars. We've got the true North American cougar in the game. And then we've got here the South American or Argentine Puma. So let's see if they actually go with the subspecies. If you look on colour. So you can see that's kind of where they range, but South American cougars, range all over the place. So you can find more information. Yeah, that's a lot of it. But yeah, really, really cool. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So yeah, thank you Tosco, thank you Great Cakes, thank you Monsoon, thank you Leaf, thank you Nicholas Linerider, and thank you everyone else, We're really making a really awesome, mod pack and really get a cool thing to talk about. So yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icon to get notified of learning things. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys like and subscribe,